What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, subscribe to our Patreon free for behind the scenes stuff. Arm yourselves, literally this go around, typology stuff. I've been sitting all day on an idea for a video about religion instinct, but and I really want to make it, but for some reason righteousness says this is the video I should do today. The MBTI types and their firearms. Don't know why, but that's what we're doing. Now, of course, this is more of a meme video, so please try to keep a handle on your literal gym instincts. And I've been thinking about this video in the back of my mind for a while, and I don't think it's just what firearms would each MBTI type choose. It would also be what scenario they are preparing for. What scenario do they think they will need a sort of gun for? So that's the framing we're going with. What does each type think is going to go wrong, and what firearm do they want to deal with that situation? Additionally, for framing, we're going to assume each type is American. And we're doing that because it affords us some leeway in terms of firearm selection and some insanity in relation to what scenario each type is thinking they're going to have to deal with. Because if we look at other high-level firearm nations or cultures, that's going to boil down to, in terms of selection, whatever they can get their hands on, unless you're in Pakistan. And the situation is going to be how best to aid Uncle Sam in his beloved blood rituals. As long as we stick with Americans, we have more than enough sorts of dumb shit and telling ways to deal with that dumb shit. Now, I've been fussing about which order to use because there's going to be some overlap between types, but I think what we'll do is we will use the 16 personalities order and then adjust it as needed. And we begin with INTJs. I'd wager an INTJ would be thinking about civil unrest with a flair of the apocalyptic in there. And that flair is important not just in prepping for situations, but again, it's also telling about the type, or about the types. Because INTJs want to be practical, but they're also rabidly autistic. So I think an INTJ is going to go with an AR-15 5.56, but retro-styled as best they can with the ability to mount modern bullshit on it. And they might even be willing to take a little bit of a hit in terms of practicality to maintain that soul of the rifle. So what I'm thinking is an AR built to look like something issued to infantry in Vietnam, with the sacrifice being the ability to put the bells and whistles on it without too much fuss. And of course, when they're going to the range, this is another odd thing about them, they'll prepare for practicality and then totally ignore it. So at the range, they're not going to be training with the bells and whistles, which is the shit they would need if anything actually went wrong. They are going to be playing with their retro toy at the range, which is better than nothing. But INTJs will build these huge, elaborate plans and then totally ignore them. Or maybe if it's a hyper zoom INTJ, they're going to style it like an FNV service rifle. INTPs. Situation, civil unrest, maybe a bit of Waco core, but with them, I'm thinking it's going to be less about the particular situation and more about, TI Dom things, trying to find the perfect solution for everything. The one weapon to rule them all. Oh, and that's another thing to add to the overall framing. We're going to assume money is only a little bit of an object. So, fancy setup, reasonable, outlandishly expensive setup, not happening. Now, To my mind, an INTP who's doing the research, they're in their effort to cover all corners, check all boxes, they'd go with a Galil Ace in 308. And they're going to set it up like a DMR with every other consideration taken to make it work in other situations. But the reason they're going with a 308 DMR setup is they're going to plan on being far away from things, but, and they will raise their eyebrows at you as they say this, you never know, hence all the other considerations. And what they will end up with in chasing this covering all corners ideal is a rifle that covers all corners in theory, but in practice is very confused and unwieldy. And when or if they figure that out, they're going to be very upset about it. Now, ENTJs are a little trickier because there are two lines of thinking you can go down when evaluating ENTJs. Because I normally always give the edge to ENTJs, but in this case, where INTJs are a little autistic, which is not a bad thing, ENTJs are a little retarded, which can be a bad thing. So we're actually going to do two ENTJs here. One on the Joe Dipshit, this is something I think I am supposed to care about, but I actually don't level, and then one who's actually very concerned with all of this. Joe or Jane Dipshit ENTJ is going to get their hands on the retroest retro AK they can. So all wood, furniture, no optics, no nothing. 762 by 39, whatever's cheapest. And they're going to do that solely because of the AKs are reliable meme. Now, AKs are reliable, but they aren't as reliable as popular culture makes them out to be. But for an ENTJ who doesn't give a shit, a TE Dom who doesn't give a shit, they're going to use that meme as an excuse not to need to think deeper into this issue. Culture says this will never fail on me, so this is what I'm going to use. And you'll notice with Joe or Jane Dipshit ENTJ, we didn't mention a scenario because for them, I think Joe or Jane Dipshit ENTJ will think about potential issues or scenarios and think about them at length, but then not really take any of them seriously until they arrive on their doorstep. That's one of the odd things, or one of the odd divides within ENTJs. They'll do a lot of thinking and talking about all sorts of stuff, and I think they'll think they care, but they don't, and you can tell what they actually care about, even if they aren't aware of it, based on how much work and attention they are putting into particular things, which is where we get to the more serious ENTJ. Scenario, it doesn't really matter, but they are preparing, sort of like the way INTPs are trying to find one gun to deal with all scenarios. It's the same thing with more serious ENTJs, but it's like they're looking at it the opposite way. It's more like they're looking at all scenarios and then trying to figure something out. Same thing, different direction. And what that translates into is less one particular firearm and more a dealing with bad situations entire setup. So well-built 5.56 AR with the bells and whistles, a Glock in 9mm, and even with the more serious ENTJs, they're probably going to be thinking more about what's going in their backpack or on their vest than they are in their firearms themselves. ENTPs. ENTPs, for their situation thinking, will start heavily with Waco core and then move outward from there. If you can deal with Waco, then you can deal with anything. And in that way, I think ENTPs are going to be more concerned with mobility and deception. I'm thinking a Glock 20 with a PDW chassis. And if there's one that can deploy or operate like that Flux Raider thing, which, for those out of the loop, the Raider is really neat. I just fucking hate SIG. That setup is neat because you can use it like a handgun or deploy it into more of a PDW situation. I don't know if anything exists like that for a Glock 20, but if it doesn't, it should, and it probably will. And I think that's what ENTPs would be using. Because it's 10mm. If it can kill a bear, it can kill a man. 10mm also has that criminal heritage thing going on. And I think they'd like the ability to conceal something that can operate like a PDW the way or with the ease you would conceal a pistol. And use it like a pistol. Adaptability is the name of the game. Maybe even put a switch on there. Got the red dot, shake well, leg lock, 10mm big holes, stupid extended magazines, of course, maybe extra magazines duct taped around their thighs. But hit and run and misdirection are going to be their entire doctrine. So the compound they are building, or the wildlands they are teaching themselves, that's going to play as much a role in what they're preparing for as their actual firearm will. Where can I lay traps? Where can I hide where they won't find me? Or can I do one of those tunnel underground situations, go down here, come out there, they'll have no idea. The flashing lights, how do I make chemical weapons? What are the odds? Somebody who's coming after me is going to have a gas mask. I have a gas mask, you don't. That sort of thing. What are level 4 plates, even if you have them? Or I think isn't there like another standard, like it goes up to 7 or something, that's more serious than anything civilians can get? What are your pearlescent plates against my Tesla coils? INFJ. Now, similar to ENTJs, there are two lines of thinking you can take with INFJs. Something that I don't see discussed very much about INFJs, but it seems to be the case with most of them, is they are really weird with the idea of killing. Which is odd, because it seems like there are a lot of INFJs in the military for some reason. So if you take an INFJ who is totally averse to killing, even if it's in self-defense, which there are a lot of them like that, I don't know why that is, I don't know why they're so weird about, or so many of them are so weird about death, but you take one like that, you give them, or they're going to buy something like a pepper ball, and then proceed to try not to think about it. And then you have these other INFJs who are very casual with the idea of killing. And unlike someone like, say, the ENTP, who acts like they're casual about the idea of killing, and you don't know if this INFJ has ever killed anybody, but you're kind of getting that vibe, with them, again, no particular situation, but their goal is going to be discretion. Whether the world has ended or not, I want to be able to do whatever needs to be done with a firearm without being noticed. Gray man shit. So I think they're going to go with a suppressed AR-57. And they're going to do this for two reasons. One, subsonic suppressed 5.7 is stupidly quiet. And with AR-57s in particular, I think it's if you take out all the internals of a magazine, because AR-57s drop their casings, spent casings, down through the magwell. So if you have an empty magazine there on the bottom, because AR-57s, their magazines go on the top, you shoot and you leave no casings behind. And it's not as wacky or messy or potentially loud or distracting as a brass catcher would be. And then you can always swap out of the subsonic ammunition into normal 5.7, and as much as I hate NATO, 5.7 is a nasty little bullet. And because they're good with people, of course, they're going to have figured out a way to get that scary armor-piercing shit without anybody knowing about it. This isn't strictly related to this video, but very high-level INFJs are a problem. they're a danger to society and to themselves and to you. INFPs. We will call it civil unrest, but what they're really preparing for, their situation, the one they have in mind, is societal collapse, political apocalypse. They are convinced and terrified of, maybe even feeling resigned to, the political apocalypse brought on by their opposing political ideology, because of course they are entrenched in political ideology. And what an INFP is going to do is go on Wikipedia, find, let's say, Cold War era forces who were fighting this enemy political ideology. What weapons were they using? And they're going to pick something out of there. They're going to want to feel spiritually connected with men and women just like them who died fighting for what they believed in, just as they will. Because, of course, they don't see themselves getting out of this alive. And for this reason, what they choose doesn't really matter. It's just going to be something their old, dead political analogs used. But why, again, it's less the weapon and more why they're choosing it. Why they're choosing it is very important. And you think feelings don't matter in terms of arms, but that's really, really, really not the case. Because when you feel connected with your arms, or you believe in what you're using, example, that 9mm 45 debate has been going on forever, and people seem generally to be leaning toward 9mm for a bunch of practical reasons. I continue to use 45 because I despise Europeans and I cherish the sensuality of 45, just using it. And when you love and enjoy and believe in something like that, as long as there is some basis in reality for your feeling that way, you will perform a lot better. I suck dick with 9mm firearms, and I feel confident it's because they were German initially. It's some 40k orc shit on a milder human level. The more you believe in it, the better it's going to work for you. Don't know why that is, seems to be the case. And if nothing else, INFPs are going to have a lot of belief. And with them, it's not just going to be belief, because or the belief is what's going to fuel the shit that will make that belief worth believing in. Because every INFP is a little authoritarian, a little orderliness node. And because of their natural temperaments or the way they like doing things, mixed with the belief, the political belief, the spiritual belief, the camaraderie they hold in this firearm they've selected, they're going to use it a lot. They're going to practice with it a lot. And because they're practicing with it constantly, and maybe they are practicing in part because they are preparing for this political Alamo situation, I think they're going to be practicing with it more to try to get into the mindset of these long dead comrades they love and believe in. So for them, this practicing, it's not just about getting good with a firearm, it's more about connecting with people. They will get good with it as a byproduct. Because with firearms, that's another factor to consider. If you aren't, I mean, you can have the perfect setup for the perfect situation, but if you haven't practiced rigorously, it's not going to mean anything. And even if you're practicing not super rigorously, you need to be practicing a lot because you'll learn things just standing in one spot and shooting at the same targets every time you wouldn't otherwise. Example, my handgun, USP 45 Elite. I'm not getting much better, and I don't have the resources or the area to do these drills and shit, but I learned something because I was shooting a lot. I started running into jams, and I was wondering why, because they started jamming all of a sudden. And what I learned was I was cleaning it incorrectly. I was not applying enough lubricant where I needed to, and I wasn't cleaning the feed ramp well enough. I thought I was, but I wasn't, and I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been doing the most basic ass practice regularly. You need to practice all the time. INFPs are going to be practicing a lot. Maybe not for the reasons they, quotes, should, but it doesn't matter. The result is a more capable human being. ENFJ. Now, I say again, ENFJs are not a type I'm very well versed in. So I feel a lot less confident about this, but we'll give it a shot. Their situation is civil unrest, but in the middle of it. Or perhaps being the cause of it. We're thinking a protest turning into a riot and getting out of hand. And it's funny because I think their setup would be the same whichever side of the riot they're on. I think an ENFJ would choose something like a super shorty or one of those Mossberg shockwaves. A concealable shotgun. And I think they would choose that less for practicality and more for shock and awe reasons. Actually, yeah, let's get a little more specific. A Mossberg, or one of those shockwaves, which are 12 gauge shotguns, pump action. I think they're all pump action. I don't think any of them are automatics, but one of them in particular has, or can be magazine fed. So still concealable, but lots of buckshot going around. For those shock and awe reasons, but whenever a person whips out a shotgun and starts laying down lots of 12 gauge, they have changed the situation. And for ENFJs, I think that's going to be important. If they're part of the rioters, that 12 gauge is going to draw attention from the innocents who are being hurt to them, to the ENFJ, the disgusting pig's attention, while also signaling an escalation. Or in other words, if you are not here and part of this and committed to what we're doing, now's the time to leave or you're going to get hurt. And if an ENFJ is one of the disgusting pigs, that's another thing. It seems like you would think cops are all high TE types, particularly sensors like STJs. In my experience, that's not the case. It's sort of like the INFJs in the military thing. There are a lot of high FE cops. Now, they're not using that FE in any friendly way, but if you take your feelings out of it, ironically, that high FE does make them effective at enforcement. So, if an ENFJ is on the cop side, dumping 12 gauge into crowds of people is certainly a statement. You are, with lead, transmitting or communicating, now is the time to fuck off. Whatever goes wrong in the world, an ENFJ is probably going to be close by, and they're going to be very concerned with controlling how this explosion goes off. ENFPs, their scenario or situation is wanting to feel cool. So they're going to buy let's say a 357 revolver or a 44 revolver. They're not going to call it a revolver. They're going to call it a classic wheel gun. It's probably going to have some engravings. They're going to get a really cute holster for it. And they're going to take pictures of themselves holding it. And you're going to say, what kind of revolver? Well, whatever revolver looked cool in this fictional character's hand. So maybe they'll buy a single action army, actually, and try to be Revolver Ocelot, and specifically not get the engravings on the revolver, but they will get custom engravings on their leather holster to be cowboys. Or maybe if they have some taste, they're going to get one of those 1851 Navy cartridge conversions because they played Red Dead. Or actually, no, they probably did play Red Dead, and for that reason, they're going to get one of those. I don't even know what they're. I know in the game it's called the Schofield revolver. I don't know if that's what they're called in real life. One of those break top revolvers. They're probably going to buy one of those. They're going to buy something like that. Or they're going to go with the dirty, hairy super long barrel, something or other. Or maybe they're going to go with one of those Chief Special revolvers. I think they're 38, and they hold 5, but they're snubbies. But they're very specifically going to go for whatever revolver makes them feel cool. Which, although I think I sound like I'm shit talking them, and I am, I don't hold that entirely against them. If you can't tell, I've done some looking into revolvers myself because they are fucking cool. But I don't want to carry one personally. I don't want to carry one like that or for those reasons. And I am not going to call it a wheel gun. And goddamn, if every fucking ENFP, and lots of people, but I see a lot of ENFPs do it, call it a fucking wheel gun. God, ooh, douche chills. I don't like it. ISTJ. Now, this is why in the very beginning I mentioned the order, or putting them in order. I guess we've been following the 16P order pretty closely here. INTJs and ISTJs are similar, or will be similar in their selections, but again, for different reasons and slightly different setups. Their situation, once again, the classic civil unrest, but they're taking civil unrest very seriously. 5.56 AR, all the bells and whistles. They might go with a 20-inch barrel, but none of that retro bullshit, which might be against stereotypes, but I think ISTJs are going to be more focused on practicality than the INTJ would like to think they're being. And there's a reason I've been becoming more and more of an ISTJ fan over time, at least the high level ones. In this thought experiment, I think an ISTJ is going to shoot more often, or as often as the people who are shooting the most, as often as the INFP, but for the right reasons this time, quotes right reasons, why you should be practicing specifically to get better with your firearm. Then, as with the ENTJ, I think they're going to spend a lot of time preparing their kit, but where an ENTJ is going to focus on something like a battle, or a high-level ENTJ, I think, is going to focus on something like a battle pack, something, or a kit designed to do a very specific thing very well. An ISTJ is going to focus on building out a solid bug-out bag, maybe supporting up to 3 people. And another thing I think an ISTJ is going to do is they're going to watch media and maybe interviews or situation videos, anything that is both going to get them into the mindset of how things are going to go down and what these fictional characters might do, mixed in with what professionals say you should do in these situations. You got to remember, dominant SI, it's like you have you have your own personal holodeck from Star Trek? Yeah, Star Trek. I think an ISTJ is going to do very well because they're going to get into it, or what they're preparing for, in the way they should. It's going to consume their mind in a non-bullshit way. And this all contributes to my growing belief in ISTJ supremacy. Evolution doesn't make mistakes. Even if lots of ISTJs are Joe dipshits, there's a reason there are a lot of them. ISFJ. Situation. Self-defense or home defense. Or maybe concealed carry, depending on... Oh boy, what's that thing people talk about? The way... It's America, you can't get away from civil unrest. The gradient of civil unrest. That's what they're going to be thinking about. They're not going to be thinking about the end of the world, because how is it going to get to that? I mean, maybe it could. Jesus Christ, some people say it is. Oh, fuck. Oh, God, I don't want to think about that. But I can see one of these milder gradients happening, and that's something I probably need to be ready for, because we're already seeing that right now, and it's kind of irresponsible not just for my own health, but for the people around me. I need to be ready to protect them, but I don't want to go crazy. I don't want to be unreasonable. G42, Glock 42 in 380. 380. I should have. Shit. Shit. I haven't. I've explained some of the stuff we've been talking about only sometimes. Damn it. Shit. Okay, 380 is like Sissy Hypno 9mm. I'm not a super guns guy, so maybe my assessment of it is completely incorrect. But if you're going to go with 380, why not just go with 9mm? I don't get it. Why would you take something as offensively pathetic and German as 9mm and make it worse? But to be fair, I think one of the reasons is the recoil is even lighter, so it's comfortable. I don't think I've ever shot a 380. Women can use it without much issue, but women can use 9mm without much issue. It's smaller. It's not going to penetrate as much as maybe another consideration. An ISFJ is going to be really concerned about bullets going through houses and hitting neighbors. I'm shitting on 380 both with my attitude and with words, but it's very reasonable. And I notice I keep saying Glocks. That's not entirely intentional, but Glock is everybody has some kind of Glock around them, at least somewhere. And it's a bit of a standard, so it's a good fit for an ISFJ. Maybe if they're a little nostalgic, they'll go with some kind of 1911 in 380. And maybe if the ISFJ is a little more forward about preparing for situations, another reason they would choose 380 is if it's a husband, he wants his wife to be able to shoot his gun and feel comfortable, both being able to use it and feeling comfortable using it. Something he can teach his kids to use. With the woman, same deal. With ISFJs, it's all going to be about protecting what's important to them and being reasonable, not going overboard. ESTJ. Let me preface this by saying I do like ESTJs. Situation or most likely situation, LARPing, which is like ENFPs but with more steps and with a little less room to deny what you're doing if you get caught. An ESTJ is going to choose it's going to be an AR or an AK, but whichever they go with, it's going to be set up in a tactical way. All the bells and whistles, as with ISTJs, but I mean really all the bells and whistles. All that shit. Every little gadget advantage they can give themselves, they're going to go with. And depending on whether they've chosen an AR or an AK, and the AK caliber doesn't really matter. For them, the caliber is not really going to matter. I'm going to say if they go AR, it's going to be 5.56. If it's going to be AK, it's going to be 7.62 by 39. And the reason I say that is they're going to have a position on which they prefer, why they prefer it, and they're going to let you know it. And they're going to think about situations they might encounter, like a civil unrest or like an apocalypse, but they're going to do it from a tactical frame of mind. So it's not how best can I deal with civil unrest, it's going to be how can I be tactical within civil unrest. And that's kind of a friendly, we gotta use, there's some words we really need to take back. I don't think we have queer now, right? And that's a good word. That word is an effective word, and it demonstrates a community's ability to take words back. Can we say gay again? Because the way ESTJs I think, go about these sorts of things is pretty fucking gay. And I say that with full offense to these sorts of people, and with no offense to cherished members of our queer community or our more dangerous queer divisions. But even if the way an ESTJ goes about thinking about and preparing for these situations in friendly ways, they're at least still practicing. They at least still have something. Even if it's just a LARP, it's better to be unprepared but LARPing than somebody who is unprepared and hasn't even LARPed. You need to LARP. You can hear. Okay, so when I make videos, any video you see that I have posted on my channel, take the time to make that video and almost always quadruple it, and that's the minimum time I've spent making a video. If I'm really cooking and it's a short video, it'll be triple. Usually safe bet quadruple, maybe quintuple. Unless something gets really fucked up and then it's much longer. So I've been doing this for a while now. Lots of pissing, lots of thinking. I am fading, but please forgive me, bear with me. ESFJ. Some kind of 20 gauge shotgun with birdshot. And I just noticed unconsciously I gave both FE DOMs shotguns, and there's probably something to that. But we'll work that out another time. And the reasoning is similar to why an ISFJ, in my mind, would choose 380 over 9mm. 20 gauge is, quotes, weaker, let's say, than 12 gauge. Personally, I like 20 gauge a lot, but it seems like people think of it more as a sporting shell. But that's precisely why I think an ESFJ would choose it, because it sounds or seems more sporting. They're going to buy a 20 gauge shotgun that looks kind of like a sporting shotgun. I don't have a particular brand in mind, but if someone outside, perhaps one of their friends, were to ask why they own a shotgun, they're going to say, well, I like to do a little sport hunting, or I like to shoot trap, or this or that, and they'll explain what 20 gauge is, and then their friend will still kind of stick up their nose at them, but they'll accept it because that false reasoning is there. Now, maybe they do sporting stuff, but they're buying it more so they can have a method of self-defense that's pretty serious. Once again, without going overboard. One that they can justify, yet we mentioned morale earlier. It's hard not to feel high morale and high confidence, which is something you would need in one of these situations, self-defense situations, home defense situations, even terrible situations. It's hard not to feel good with a big fucking shotgun in your hands. And 20 gauge, it's not 12, but it's still big. It's more manageable, that's another probable consideration. Well, one of my other family members, or maybe one of my kids, who doesn't normally shoot, would be able reasonably to pick this up and to use it. And then, unlike ISFJs, they have, or ESFJs have any tertiary, so the reason they're going with a shotgun instead of a handgun is they want to have, kind of like, you know, their NTP brethren, they want to have their bases covered. A shotgun is, specifically with birdshot, is going to be good for defending yourself, but also good for providing for yourself and to people around you. You could... shotguns are a good choice. They're also affordable. ISTP. Situation apocalypse. The world explodes, zombies come out, or we get invaded. They probably like Red Dawn and Homefront a lot. Cool movie, cool game. And reasonably, they are also probably thinking civil unrest, because who in America isn't? But they want, if they're, I mean, they were probably going to buy a gun anyway, but they want that kick-assery idea in the background. So, yes, I'm being reasonable. Yes, I'm preparing for this. Probably what's going to go down. But if some wicked shit went down, then I'm ready for it. And for that reason, they're going to buy an M40, which is a bolt action rifle in 308. Snipers in Vietnam used it. They're probably going to tell you stories about Long Trang or the White Feather. Mike from Breaking Bad is probably one of their comfort characters. That is his weapon of choice. So actually, this is we haven't talked about this in a long time. The the famous ISTP INTJ mistypes, very similar. Those two types are, and getting back into it here, yeah, that is pretty similar. Their line of thinking is going to be pretty similar. However, maybe thank God for thought experiments. Maybe that's something you can use to determine or distinguish ISTPs from INTJs who look very similar. Their reasoning is going to be very similar, but their actions maybe will be different. That's something we'll need to think about. So here, the INTJs and the ISTPs' reasoning are both going to be similar, but the reason the ISTP chooses the bolt action sniper rifle over the retro-ish AR is like the INTP. The ISTP is going to be thinking, even if they aren't necessarily thinking it at the front of their mind, if something bad goes down, I don't want to be close to it. But unlike the INTP, who has more or less sense in their DMR but sort of all-rounder setup we discussed earlier, the ISTP is going to have more or less sense by focusing on doing one thing very well. And they will practice. This is another type that is going to be practicing a lot. They're probably going to get... The NI is pure strain, hyper useful autism at times. They're going to get very stupidly good with that M40. And they're also going to be low, medium, or high key, but key in some fashion, LARPing as a sniper. The difference being with other types or other LARPers, if they've decided they're going to stick with it, they will be able to back it up at some point. ISFP. Situation, another one of these. Nothing in particular, because it's not what happens that really matters to them here. It's going to be what they're going to do about it, and what they're going to do about it is bug out hard. And people have this conception of ISFPs as these strong, silent type fighters or strugglers. And that is the case sometimes, but I don't think an ISFP in one of these disaster situations is going to be one of these people who sets out missions or is super concerned with all this other stuff. They're going to take it as an opportunity to do something they already wanted to do, which was go out and try to live off the land and commune with it. You know, when you think about it, it's fucked up what's happening to all those people, but at the same time, those sons of bitches did it to themselves. You know, who do they have to blame? We've seen this coming for a long time. Maybe it's a good thing for me, at least. I get to do this thing I've always been wanting to do. Nature provides, I believe that. Once again, no particular brand. I think they would go with one of those 22 410 over-under survival rifles. The kind pilots used to get issued with in case they went down and needed to survive for some extended period. 22 is a very small bullet. Usually what you're going to be doing with 22 is it's like a ranch kind of bullet. Killing snakes on a ranch or killing squirrels or something. Survival rifle. Killing small game. And then 410, very small shotgun shell, but same philosophy. Same uses. Birdshot, killing small birds, killing snakes. Maybe you have some slugs with you. Maybe you use those to hunt something a little larger, but The entire idea behind these 22 410 over-under rifles is they're really great survival rifles. And not just because of what these bullets are designed to do, but also because 22 is very small. And for shotguns, 410 is very small. You can carry a lot of it. High quantity for not a lot of weight. And I do think ISFPs are going to be thinking about this in terms of hiking. ISFPs are pretty particular. At least when it comes to stuff they give a shit about and fully intend on doing. I mean, they're gonna screw around and do whatever otherwise, but if they're gonna do something, they're going to be very particular about it. So, think. I mean, it's not thinking camping. Really, what they want to do is go so deep into the wilderness and develop such a skill, such a communion with nature, they can just be out there as long as they need to. In fact, I bet they aren't even planning on relying on their over under 22 410 forever. That's just something that will help them get their feet underneath them, and then they can transition to the bow they learned to make. ESTP. Situation, nothing in particular. You know, it's good to have a gun. It's good to be able to defend yourself and provide for yourself if necessary. But if, say, I needed to rob a bank to earn money to save my daughter who has cancer or something, or, you know, if I were on a boat filled with cocaine and the feds were coming down on me and I needed to fight them off, and the cocaine was in my boat and I was smuggling it because my daughter has cancer and I need to pay for her treatments. In my mind, an ESTP would go for a classic Uzi. And not just because an Uzi is an action movie classic, though that is part of it, but also because in culture, it seems like the Uzi shows up wherever or whenever anything important or game changing is happening. In other words, I think an ESTP is going to get a gun for all the reasons you should get a gun: defense, providing for yourself, bad shit going down. But they're going to choose an Uzi for that image and symbolism. It's not just one or the other, it's both. What does it represent? If you're going to be living changing, dangerous times, you go with a gun that has survived dangerous, changing times. That almost represents dangerous, changing times. Represents controversy, law and order, and flashiness. And it's 9mm, so there are going to be bullets everywhere. They will think of that. But this feels right, this pairing, ESTP and Uzi, but I can't put my finger on it. It's very important. I am dead serious. I think an ESTP would be thinking about the symbolism of their Uzi, or that they have chosen an Uzi. There's something symbolic, almost mystical, in the Uzi's service history that, you know, official and unofficial, that would speak to an ESTP and make them choose that. And then finally, ESFP. Situation, specifically protecting people around them. And I don't think they're going to have any particular bad scenario in mind, but keeping people around them safe is going to be their goal. I think you'd see them using an AR 5.56, but specifically with a super safety, probably drum magazines, some nice optics, and probably a compensator. And for people who don't know, a super safety is a mechanism that makes your rifle safer by allowing you to fire it in semi-automatic almost as fast as a fully automatic rifle would shoot. But because you are not technically holding down the trigger to fire, because with the super safety it's very safe, it activates the safety between each shot, you're actually doing or pulling the trigger multiple times, meaning it's not actually fully automatic, meaning it's legal. If you want to risk buying one while it's still legal. I don't know if it's still legal. I don't have one. I think binary triggers are a lot cooler, very legal, very defensible. A binary trigger, you pull the trigger, fire, release the trigger, fire. That's more than enough. I don't have a binary trigger either. I'd like one. I don't have one. And I don't think an ESFP would be thinking Waco necessarily, or Ruby Ridge or whatever, but that is the direction they would start moving in. Defensible positions and intense firearms to deal with that. So, how do you protect the people you care about? By scaring off anyone who would come up with lots of lead, or buying them enough time to get away by sitting in a defensible position and drawing all the fire because you're shooting laser beams. We haven't talked about them in a while, but ESFPs are weird in that they are bombastic, they are risk takers, and you would think that would make them ineffective, yet when they get into effective mode, they're one of the only types who can out logistics or out logic ENTJs at their own games. I think you'd see something similar here. ESFPs would build themselves very well, very effectively into doing something ill advised. And they would justify what they're doing. It's not strictly for them, it wouldn't strictly be justification like they're looking for an excuse, though it would conveniently be an excuse. But for the rifle they're building, for the modifications to their home or area or compound they're doing, taking care of their family is going to be a true concern that also conveniently gives them an excuse to do all this crazy shit. And Jesus Christ, that is types and firearms. I hope you've enjoyed. Once again, this is a bit of a meme video. I think we were able to fit in some good typological stuff anyway. Please, for your sake, for everybody's sake, buy a gun, learn how to use it, be responsible with it, and be aware, be ready. People are awful. People in power or with power are even worse. You need, for your sake, for everyone's sake, you need some kind of equalizer. Buy a firearm. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.